Just tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, how you got into being an IRO.
I have been an IRO now for the past 5 years. Prior to that, like many other IROs, I was a manager working in children's services across the spectrum from front door right the way through to leaving care. 10 years management experience, and prior to that, possibly 6 years social work experience. So I've been round the block. Yes, it's been a journey.
Okay. And what made you want to enter the world of IROing then, becoming an independent reviewing officer?
Okay, well, I think, and just speaking honestly, around 5-6 years ago, I think that times were getting quite tough in a lot of local authorities, where I found as a manager there was increasing pressure placed on me to perform a real performance drive on my team to meet targets as a priority. And I felt that at the time what I was lacking or what I was missing was really the face-to-face contact I had with children and families.
So you came into the world of IROing about 5 years ago. Can you just say a little bit about what it was like then? And then I want to move us on to some of the changes that you've seen.
Well, yes, the experience of being an IRO was great. I mean, I was all of a sudden doing the thing I loved most, which was just being with families and children and that kind of direct work with families, which I felt as though I'd been lacking and missing for some time. Of course, when I stepped into the IRO role was similar to as it has been, I don't know, for a very long time. With a large number of professionals at these meetings, and my job was very much linked with just a quality assurance role in terms of establishing whether or not this team, if you like, around this child are presenting the correct care plans and the right plans for these children. So that's how things were when I started, and I should say things have thankfully moved on from there.
So can you, moving on then, tell us a little bit more about how things have moved on and what helped that shift?
Well, I knew when I started the role that there was an ambition, shall I say, to have a look at the way in which we are delivering services via our safeguarding review service, and I was enthused by the fact that there was some investment in both us as professionals and the system to make this into a programme which was going to be more child focused and more led around the needs of the child. What we focused on, certainly in the last 4 to 5 years, is a focus very much on the lived experience of the child. And every time we are meeting and greeting and working with that child, we're investing in their lived memory of their experience. And I've worked with a number of young people for the last 5 years consistently, and so in so many ways I've become the lived narrative, the lived memory of their experience in care. And what I can do therefore is to create a process by which I can enable that child or young person to join me along that journey, and hopefully prepare them for adult life with a sense that they've really participated in something meaningful, and they've got a clear understanding of what their review process has been like.
Because you hold a lot of their history as part of that journey, I guess is what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
So in terms of what that looks like, Chris, can you say a little bit about the approach to reviews, perhaps a little bit about the difference between the review process when you first started as an IRO and how it's moved on, but also looking at the recording of the reviews? And I'm particularly interested in what you were saying about reflecting the child's lived experience and holding that story.
Well, the big theme is that we realise that the IRO and the IRO role can't do everything all at the same time. We can't make this a meaningful experience for children and at the same time fulfil our quality assurance role, so we've separated the two out in lots of ways. In lots of ways now we're involved in having ongoing conversations with social workers in between reviews. having scheduled telephone conversations with them and establishing the extent with which the plan which you worked out with them at their previous review has progressed. If there's stuff that needs to happen around those plans, we can deal with that outside of the review process. Therefore, what that does is it enables us to free up our skills and our abilities to engage more with children and young people and set them as a priority in terms of bringing them into the process. And so reviews no longer need to look like, a boardroom full of professionals. Reviews can happen anywhere. We can be creative about the kinds of activities that we engage in while we're conducting those reviews. I've met them in parks, we've met them on walks, we've made cakes together, we've made videos together, played games, done drawings, done creative work, and all of that contributes to my greater understanding about what the lived experience is of that child. And through that, what I'm able to do is to capture and record what was really going on for that child at that moment in time. So we fulfill a purpose of almost creating a landmark throughout the years of a child's life, which hopefully become meaningful for the child and young person when they're older. So what we're doing is we're contributing to the life story work of these children. The reports which we write are quite personal. Well, they're personal in the sense that they're written to the child. And that's because I want the child, the young person, to know now and when they're older that what I'm saying to them are the sentiments of what I really genuinely feel about what's going on for them in their lived situation. And we don't skirt around the bush with that one. I mean, we obviously want to celebrate the positives and the positive the positive achievements which every child will inevitably make in between reviews. But we'll also highlight the areas which we think that there needs to be further work done on, and we'll be open and realistic about that. But when we're writing to the child, no matter what else might change in the child's world and the child's life, when they're an adult, I'm ensuring that they can go back to these records and they can see very clearly what their IRO, who's been with them consistently through their care experience, has to say about the reasons why they're in local authority care, how I feel their needs are being met, and the progress they're making. And in so doing, that obviously means that we're cutting down on the notion that children or adults with care experience have to hunt their way through case file information to glean anything about what was going on in their lives.
I get a real sense of the child's voice within that. But can you say a little bit more? I'm thinking about how you determine, for example, where the review is going to take place or what the focus of the review is going to be. Can you say a little bit more about how the child's voice influences that process?
Sure. I think we're placing a much stronger emphasis now that the review is not an event, but it is a process. And therefore what we're having to do is be much more creative about how we get the information that we really need to examine and scrutinise the local authority plans and the effectiveness of local authority working, whilst also ensuring that that the child's views remain central. So to do that, frequently we'll meet with children outside of a review process, or I'll have 1, 2, 3 or more meetings in order to ensure that the child's given the opportunity to express themselves however they may want and have their views properly represented amongst their family and professional team. So doing that, I've worked with children, young people in whichever way comes naturally to them. What I'm good at, it brings me back home to all the kind of social work skills that I enjoyed developing back in the day, which I haven't had much opportunity to exercise until more recently. And for me, I don't mind sitting in the back of a garden, sat in a plastic canoe with a child sat next to me pretending to paddle down the river as we tell each other, about what we're seeing and what journey we're on. And by doing that, then I just get a richer sense of what's going on for that child.
So So your relationship with a child is clearly really, really important. And you spoke earlier, you mentioned, family and some of the, indeed the wider connections that a child has as well. Can you say a little bit about family, how you interweave family and foster carers, and perhaps something about the different approach that foster carers are now taking to the recording of reviews?
So I guess what we're trying to do is we're trying to get information sources from all of the important people in a child's life, and to be able to capture that in a meaningful way so that they got a clear record of what was going on for them, or what people were thinking about them for when they're older. So, at reviews we've got the social workers who are writing their reports to the child, highlighting to them not just the history of what the chronology of what's happened to them over the previous, say, 6 months, but actually what they genuinely felt about them and their progress. And likewise, we're asking the same of foster carers, providers, to personally write letters to the children, to again reflect on what they feel is important about the progress that they're making. So in so doing, what we'll do is to capture a very sincere, genuine view of what people's genuine feelings are about their lived experience. And all of that is about us moving away from a clinical view that what we need to be doing is simply recording facts and storing them away. So the records which we keep on children become their lived, their live, lived type records which they can continually add to and keep with them.
So something about that instilling that sense of security and care and love through the relationships and our approach, the relationship that we develop with the child, and also recognising the importance of family, whatever that might look like, and the child's lifelong links. I just wanted to reflect on some of the experience. In fact, you've got a wealth of experience, Chris, of working with children throughout childhood into their later age.
Is that every child and young person is different, and their sense of what they would call family, or which important people are key to them is different in every scenario. But we need to recognise those differences, and people's lived experience of having different important people in their lives means that we need to listen to those people and ensure that those links are maintained for that child. And in part that also does include quite often the IRO as being one of those important people in their team who carries through with them that live narrative of what's happened to them in their lives. So yes, we will continue to review young people into adolescence, and in much the same way when we start our pathway planning processes at 16, we encourage young people at that stage to start to think and continue to have those aspirational thoughts about what they want in life, in ways with which we would want to emulate the good practice that goes in successful families, where young people are having those conversations about what you want to be when you grow up. And so the links between the process, the pathway plan review process, are similar in that sense, that if that's necessary, just to ensure that our continuity of care around their changing relationships, potentially at the age of 18, are managed by their IRO with a review post-18.
Thinking about some of the conversations that we've had about children and young people's emotional, mental health, experience of belonging, potential for feelings of loneliness and isolation, particularly for some of the more vulnerable young people that are perhaps moving on to adulthood.
Yeah, I mean it's such a difficult age for any young person to transition into adulthood, even with the best and most stable relationships in their lives. And yet somehow or other we're expecting some of our most vulnerable children to go through this journey and to, by virtue of the way in which we set up our systems, to lose important relationships as they approach 18 and then thereafter. For us, what's key is that we see our role in bringing people together for this child, both from the services which will support them post-18, including their personal advisor from the leaving care team, or from, say, disability services, potentially also from YOS to probation or other mental health services, which would otherwise appear to end when they're 18. We're key in terms of keeping those professionals, that professional team, tight around that young person, working closely with them as they reach adulthood, and so that what we're not losing, and most importantly, what we're not losing is that tacit knowledge, that know-house knowledge about how best to support these children and young people.
So young people don't get left behind, and so that we're effectively equipping young people to reach out and to utilise the support that's there, but we're also absolutely giving proper emphasis to their relationships and how they can make new relationships as well en route, as well as retaining steady relationships that they have. About really briefly the importance of children's voices, the importance of advocacy, and your role as an IRO in terms of championing children's rights, making sure that their entitlements are met and any issues are dealt with effectively. Did you want to say anything about that, including maybe some of the changes that you've seen again over time?
Yes, thank you. I mean, what's been a useful process has been the ability for us to really get to understand more about the lived experience of children that we're working with, and in doing that, that means that we are able to flex our IRO roles in ways which become much more powerful and much more meaningful. Because part of our role, we're not paid advocates, but we are adversarial, and therefore it's important that I can therefore take the opportunities to champion the exact views which young people feel are important to them. And whether or not I or anybody else necessarily agrees with them, the process of enabling children and young people to feel like they're being listened to and are given the opportunity to have honest, realistic responses, responsible responses to the issues which they raise is invaluable. So what we're doing is we're starting to get a process whereby children and young people are able to represent the issues which they feel are important at reviews in different kinds of ways, and sometimes we've used advocates for that. Other times, of course, we'll go through a written note of what they said. I've also used video recording where children have been given a video presentation of some of the key areas, and then I've asked professionals as well, in fact, to give a video response to. And that's a great way of involving young people. No young person your child should be subject to, which is having lots of professionals in a room talking to them about them. So,
but equipping them at the same time.
Oh, absolutely.
Giving children the skills and resources to raise their own voices, as well as having the support around them to advocate on their behalf if necessary as well.
Absolutely.
Bring an advocate in.
Absolutely.
Are you able to say anything more about that in terms of how we weave an understanding and enable children to understand their cultural heritage and identity? Yeah.
Well, I think that the IRO role is really well placed to be able to ask and investigate some of those issues and questions, because I find that if I'm meeting a young person in Brighton Hove and they are Black, British, living in Brighton, I am well placed to be able to, what does that feel like to you? What does your world feel like to have a lived experience of living very much in an environment which does not represent your ethnicity? That's a huge advantage about my role, because I can ask those kinds of questions, and also see the extent with which over time I feel as though that child or young person is adjusting or not to the pressures which that places them under. I also think for children in local authority care that the question of identity, which is significantly underrepresented, is the fact that part of their identity, they are in local authority care. That is part of their identity, and that is underrepresented in terms of, I think, how in the past we've enabled children and young people to appreciate that difference about them. And so anything that we can do along our way to improve their understanding of their lived experience through care, including the reasons why they've come into local authority care, what the local authority's responsibilities and duties are to them, as well as what we hope for their future. What are our hopes and aspirations? Just in much the same way as we would expect any good parent to do the same with their own child. And the more that we can instill those sorts of conversations and ways of thinking within our review processes, the better.
And so just linked to that, again, I'm thinking again about the relationships that you have. So you've got this really important relationship with the child. You're working with others to try and equip the child to deal with some of life's challenges, including challenges around a kind of sense of identity, of the care experience, within that racial identity, some of the difficulties that and prejudices and stigma that they will face and have to deal with. So there's something about how you enable the child to deal with that, but you're also working in amongst a professional network, so the child's carer, family, social worker, etc. So I guess some of that is about enabling them to also assist the child, but I'm also thinking about areas of challenge within that. So I'm assuming sometimes there are occasions when things aren't working well for the child, and
yes, you're right. I mean, some things.
Issues.
Things don't always go smoothly. That's because we're living in a real world with real people, with real challenges and difficulties, and sometimes there aren't any straightforward, easy answers to them.
So how do you use your role?
Well, I think that the IRO role is well placed in terms of being able to firstly represent. I start with what the child's feelings and wishes are. So I feel like I can properly represent them within the meeting. And therefore I've got one hat which is dealing with ensuring that the meeting and the professional network is properly recognising what's going on for the child, whilst also understanding what the local authority's roles and responsibilities are. My job very much is to bring people together, and I use a phrase which I do carry around with me for different reviews, so it has been duplicated, but I do talk about the team very much. Team so and so, because we all have to see ourselves very much, and the more I can bring together the perspective of what we agree upon in terms of our principles for this young child or young person, the more I can get the best out of the individuals who are pulling together to support them. And the best way of doing that is to bring people back to reality conversations about the lived experience of that child.
Fantastic. And challenge occurs within that as well?
Yes, of course. If a challenge is necessary, then we will we'll need to raise I will be speaking with a social worker or their manager and raising necessary alerts as necessary to ensure that the local authority, where there is a dispute over what is the best way forward for the child, that those matters can be resolved in ways which we are happy that are both satisfactory in terms of the child, their wishes and their needs, alongside also the local authority and their intentions. But that comes with the territory. My role as being an independent IRO is crucial, and the fact that I have that level of independence gives me that open door ability to be able to make challenges when necessary.
So a big emphasis on trying to resolve issues, so trying to work collaboratively, work with people, really working with the relationships with the team around the child to get things done quickly, to progress chase, to resolve issues, like I say, but where necessary, using your independence as a IRO to challenge and indeed raise disputes if needed up through the hierarchy. And just lastly, just to finish off, so you were talking there about working collaboratively. We've spoken about change and development and improvement and aspirations. Anything you want to say about IRO and leadership in terms of leading and influencing change?
Yes, I mean I think that we change is inevitable. It's not something which local authorities never stand still. But with different kind of leadership practices, in operation across our local authorities, it's all too easy for perhaps previous policies or previous good intentions towards looked after children to become eroded in various ways. So I think that the IRO role is just incredibly well placed to offer the checks and balances around the local authority in terms of previous practice, current duties, and how they're currently meeting needs of children in local authority care. For the small number of IROs we have in our service, we have oversight over every child in local authority care, and that gives us that ability to have a crow's nest approach to what's going on in terms of leadership practice within local authorities, and to be able to raise and alert any areas that we feel maybe where quality, our standards and qualities, we may feel maybe being eroded.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chris.
That's
Thank you for
okay.
your time.